KD of Fortune. Now, Ken is my name. Anne now is just away to get a spot of H2O for Frank here. In case he faints now or anything, he's been a man of delicate disposition. And he told this talk of Glendalough and water and lakes of Ireland and all that. And in the event of we'll be straight out that steps we came in on and away to our left hand side, or out this door to our right hand side. Follow Anne, she's the leader. Doing well to keep up her. And without further, Mike also mentioned we'll go box to the back of the hall for donations. As you know, there's no membership fee and there's no fee for attending any lecture or anything like that. It's merely voluntary contributions which keep the Historical Society going, of which you are all members if you're present here tonight for the first time or for the 100th time, and we welcome all of you. There is David does a massive job here recording each and every one of these interviews, and all of them can be downloaded through the Facebook site. They'll be up, each lecture will be up many weeks, about 2 weeks after each lecture. They'll be up on the Facebook site for anybody to delve into our later stage. Come back to send us solicitors letters or anything of that jazz. That nature. In the meantime, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Frank Tracy. Many of you have met Frank before, many of you have heard him before. It's a great testament to his lectures that you'll come back here again for more punishment this evening. Tonight's lecture, as you can see, is Glendalough and the Celtic Church. So you all sit back now, enjoy, and I'll talk to you all again later. Good evening.
It's nice to be back again, and tonight we're going to talk about Glendalough and the Celtic Church, which is the key to it, because I think I said this to you before, the historian Robert Key, who is English and wrote a very fine history of Ireland, but in the introduction to that history, he said, one thing you must understand about the Irish, he said, is they cannot forget their history, or remember it for that matter. Very perceptive. We remember the bits that suit whatever kind of tribe you belong to, and forget all the other bits. And Glendalough's a bit like that. People go to Glendalough because the scenery is self-evident. You know what I mean? You'd want to be a lula not to appreciate the scenery. There's all these quaint little churches and things which are nice, you know. But it's not Notre Dame, and it's not Chartres, and it's not Canterbury. But it's lovely, it's nice. And then they go into the hotel, and they have a coffee, tea, scone, and they go home, and they say, that was lovely. Which it was. And they've no idea historically what they were looking at. None whatsoever. But nice. You know, nice people. So we're going to start off and look at a mixture of things that lead up to the Celtic Church and to Glendalough. And you start off with the Celts. Now the Celts originated as a distinct kind of people around about 800 BC in that area there. And they spread westward and they spread eastward. And they were quite a big empire there. Now underneath them was the Romans, the Greeks. Now the Romans overran the Greeks in time, and then around into the Jews in Palestine and so on there. But as you can see, they spread quite considerably. And there they were sitting above the Romans. They even had a go at the Romans at one stage. And they were a race who were very warlike. There's a very famous statue of the dying Gaul. Gauls were Gauls and Gaels. We were Gaels. The dying Gaul with the torque around his neck. They fought naked, which was very interesting. And they also were big horse people. And they were the inventor of trews. Trews are trousers. The Romans didn't do trousers. The Celts invented trews to keep their bits in one place where they were on the horses. And they didn't have a written language, but a spoken language, and the nearest they got to a written language was Owen. You see the little scratches there on the stones. And that was so difficult that it was usually confined to just someone's name. You know what I mean? When someone was buried there. They were great metal workers, really good at metal. They were religious, and they were very much into a belief in the other world. And the other world wasn't up there or down there, the other world was among you. And they believed in thin places, that there are places where you are very close to the other world. But we're not going to go into all that. If you want to talk on the Celts, we'll do that another week. The typical Celtic household was this, a little ring fort. Fort is too strong a word. The fence was just to keep the neighbour from robbing the few sheep or cattle you had. And they built these rooms. There remains of about 40,000 of them left in the country. Now you drive all over the country, you don't see them. But once I say it to you, it's like a particular model of car. I say to you, keep your eye out. You start seeing them everywhere as you go around. That's the way it goes. Now, as I said, there was tension between them and the Romans, and in fact they had to go at Rome one day, until eventually Julius Caesar, 58 BC, said, bugger this. And he set out, and he said, I'll sort them out. And he did. Caesar's Gallic Wars, 58 AD to 50, 58 BC to 50 BC. And there's a guy, Vercingetorix, and he was the head of the Celts on the continent, and there's his surrender to Julius Caesar. You see the torque on this fellow's neck, and they're all submitting the final surrender on the continent. There's a few things not right about that drawing, which was done centuries later. The shrews are right. They didn't have saddles. They rode bareback. They didn't have saddles. And that particular horse, they didn't ride that kind of horse. They were more kind of cart type horses. But anyway, and then when they sorted out on the continent, Caesar said she will keep going, and they went across to Britain, and the leader of the Celts in Britain was a lady, Boudicca, and he sorted her out as well. And then they had a look across at us, and they said she isn't worth it. Now there are Roman coins and little tiny artifacts have been found on the beaches on the east coast, which would indicate that they made the odd day trip. But we remained, and northern Scotland remained the only Celtic area intact as it was and not overrun. Now the Romans now ruled all this. When they sorted out the Celts, they ruled all this, but they didn't settle in Ireland, other than to make the occasional day trip. So now you have the Celts and you have the Romans. So we're up here, a little Celtic nation, not bothering anyone, keeping quiet. The Romans are here, and then over here, around 30 to 33 AD, we have a young itinerant preacher. Now I went to get a picture of that man without a halo. It was nearly impossible, you know, but eventually I found one without a halo. This is Jesus, of course. Or if he was walking around the street and you shouted Jesus, he wouldn't answer you. His name was Yeshua in Aramaic, Yeshua. And he spoke Aramaic, which is the equivalent of Donegal Irish. And if you were to put money on where you should go to start off a big world organisation, it wouldn't be where he was born, and it wouldn't be speaking Aramaic. And but there he was, and he preached for 3 years, and he got himself killed. And if you were a betting person, you would say, and that stopped. So the first 300 years, they weren't really getting anywhere. And then Bigor, the Roman emperor, converted, Constantine. And Christianity became the religion of the Roman Empire. And some of those Christianized Britons, around 400, Patrick was not the first, Palladius and Auxilius, and there's no record of Patrick in Rome, although he was there, but there's record of Palladius and Auxilius and Licernius, and they were sent to Hibernia to minister to the Christians in Hibernia. So that means that there were Christians there already. If you're going to minister to the Christians, there were Christians there already. And Patrick would have been one of them, and Patrick's claim to fame is not that he converted the Irish, which he didn't, but he converted the boss, the High King. Because just like Constantine converting in those days, if you got the boss to go your way, they all went with the boss. They all knew what side the bread was buttered on. So the trick was to convert the boss. Now, the arrival of those missionaries in Ireland coincided with the retreat of the Romans from Britain, from France, and from Belgium, because the Romans fell into the same problem of all empires, whether it's Napoleon, whether it's the Tsar, whether it's the British, and that is, you extend too far and you can't hold a thing that big, because you can't keep supplies going, you can't, the British were ruling India with something like 15,000 soldiers, and then Napoleon, and again Napoleon kept going and going and going in Russia, and all they have to do is what's known as a Russian defense. If you have vast areas of land, you just keep retreating and retreating until the other fellas' lines are stretched out so far that they can't keep supplying them, and then you cut them off. And didn't Hitler go along and do the very same thing? Never learned. And this is what happened to Romans. Around the year 420, they started to pull out, because this was the Roman Empire here, and now this is early Christianity, but the Roman Empire was there, and up above them were all these. Christ never spoke a word of Latin, but Constantine imposed Latin on the whole thing. The structure, you have the emperor, the pope, the senate, the curia, the regional governor, the bishop, the perugia, the parish. Nothing whatever got to do with Christ. Never said it's pulling back. So around the time that the Romans started pulling back, Christianity had got that far and into Ireland here. But the Romans pulled out of Britain, they pulled out of France, and Christianity went with them. And the only place that Christianity left was up in this little island. Christianity had retreated down here. And these are all barbarians, what we reckon, Huns and Angles and Jews. Now, the Christianity that was in the Romans was a mixture of the teachings of Christ and the administration of the Roman Empire. Up to the time Constantine converted, the church had no great structure. It was a kind of a cell thing. You had the church here, you had the church there, you had the church there. And even in St. Paul's time, he did a terrible job keeping them all in line. You know what I mean? Because there was no central control. Constantine brought that. And Constantine brought the language syllable about that. And that's straight Roman structure. And then to give yourself some importance, you then have to put a bit of colour on, a few robes and stuff. And that's all pure Roman. Christ probably only had one pair of sandals if he was lucky. You know what I mean? He'd nowhere to live. He never built a church. And the Christian churches mimicked the basilicas that the Romans had in there. But that's another. So the point I'm making is that you have belief in the teachings of Jesus wrapped up in the administration of the Roman Empire. But the Romans never came to Ireland. And now they were gone. And Christianity was gone with them. So for the first time, you have Christianity with an administration and a structure which is not Roman, Celtic. No dioceses, no parishes, monasteries. It was a monastic church. And it drew its roots and its language from the Celts. Okay. Now there's some very, very early Celtic Christianity. Do you see these slabs here? They're out in Killade, they're out in Enniskerry. Well, those pockmarks are non-Christian. And you'll see them in Newgrange, and you'll see them in Loughborough, and you'll see them around the country in a different way. So there's your mixture of pre-Christian and Christian there. There's the Ogham there. See the Ogham and Coleman there. This is a cross in pure Celtic art. You won't find that anywhere but with the Celts. So they're mixing the Celtic culture with the Christian belief. That's over in Rockmichael there. There's a very, very rare thing, a Tau cross in the shape of a T. So they're beginning to form their own version of Christianity. But it's a mixture of the teachings of Christ and the Celtic culture, and the Celtic language, and the Celtic system of chiefs. The abbot was the chief, and they started to set up these monasteries all over the country. And you see, they had at this stage, no interference from Rome. Rome was gone over the hills and far away. They were developing all this. Now, they were very big into anchorites, hermits, eremitism. They prized being a hermit. So therefore, quite a lot of them started hitting off in twos and threes to Skellig Michael or wherever. And even around here, they set up little hermitages. There's one in Kildare and Skerry, Kiltiernan, Kilmechanic, Killiney Lenin. Those of you who are into Irish, where are we there? Killiney. The Church of the Daughters of Lenin. Killiney. And these are small little settlements with 2, 3 or at most 4 monks. And these are all over the country. And if you go to an old cemetery, very old cemetery in the country, and you start to look around, invariably you'll see a little room that they start to bury people around these little hermitages when they were long gone. And later on, as we see later, they used them as killings, and that was where you buried unbaptized children. Doesn't bear thinking how Christians could even think like that. But look, that's not what we're here for tonight. So, they believed that work was prayer. And the more beautiful the work, the greater the prayer. So they got into metalwork, they got into writing. They were the monks were the first to put the Gaelic language into writing. And how they did it was, they took the Latin alphabet, which they had from the Latin, and they applied that phonetically to the Gaelic that was being spoken. So the Gaelic alphabet is the Latin alphabet. Now, they ran into a few problems with guttural things and so on. So they created the Shevu and the Fopin to get around that. But other than that, it's based, the letters are the Latin. And look at the beautiful work here. So this is, you see, the mixture. That's a cross the conch. But this is pure Celtic. You won't see that in Rome, you won't see that in Chartres, Notre Dame, Yarda, Chalice, the Bell. And of course, these are the first visual aids. Because what you're teaching there is the gospel, they're all gospel scenes. So you sat them down and you preached the gospel there. And these are all gospel. It's a magnificent work. That's Skellig Michael, that's Kilmacada, Gallows. So absolutely, it's astounding. These buildings are astounding in their simplicity, because they didn't believe in all highfalutin wave around, incense and all this dancing around. Get down, pray, work. In the monastery there were different levels of people. you had the working monk, and then above that you had the builders who were building the churches and carving the crosses and so on. Then you had the metal workers, and then you had the scribes, and then you had the hermits. So there was a whole structure there, but not a diocesan structure. They did have bishops, but bishop was a position of honour. The bishop wasn't in charge. And a place like Glendalough might have 3 or 4 bishops, where they'd give it to you as an honour, as an all about. The boss was the abbot. And the abbot wasn't necessarily an ordained priest. Now, most of the lower ends, the monks and the stoneworkers and so on, most of them were married. As indeed were priests in the Roman Catholic Church up to around about 1100. And if you have doubts about that, then back in Tallaght, Monastic, some of the priests, some of the bishop. And sure, why not? I mean, at least 4 of the apostles were married. I don't know what the hang-up is. Anyway, that's how it functioned. The ordinary working people then, they were working for the monks. These monasteries had thousands of acres. Thousands of acres. Do you know the big weir there at Furhouse there, that diverts the Dodder into the Poddle? Well, that was built in 1240 by the monks in St. Thomas's in Thomas Street to bring water into the city. They had vast acreages, and that was the system that operated. And it became known as the Celtic Church. It lasted for 600 years. There's some of the key figures in Ireland where they were. They also gave equal status to women. And some of these abbesses, you have Bridget, Ita, Monine, Ida, and they were very powerful people. It is said that Bridget was ordained. Certainly they were very powerful, and they had equal status to the abbots in the church. Then they got the idea, the Romans had pulled out of England, had pulled out of France, and were right down here, northern Italy, and across into Greece. So they decided then they would start converting the barbarians, and they set out in their droves, all these places, Würzburg, Salzburg, Bobbio, St. Gall, and so on. And there's some of the names. Columkill, Columbanus, Gallus, Aidan, Coleman, Killian, Fergal, John Scotus, Erigena. Now a lot has been written on all of these. I'll just, Columbanus, I'll tell you now in a minute about. There's Columbanus, Bobbio, St. Gallen, Gatesville, Gall, St. Fergal, Salzburg, Columkill, Iona, Würzburg, and Aidan in Lindisfarne, and so it goes on. Columbanus settled down in Burgundy, but he fell foul of the King of Burgundy because he kept going on preaching about how it wasn't right that the king was having her off with someone else's wife. The king didn't like that. So the king decided he'd have another one with his old monks, and he put them on a boat and said, England's that way. But that night, the boat was hit by a storm, and they were washed back up on the continent, further up. So he took that as a sign from God that God didn't want him to go home. So he went around Burgundy and settled down in Bobbio. John Scotus Erigena. Do you remember he used to know, was it the fiver or the tenor? Fiver, he was on one of them. Well, he was one of the Celtic Church's theologians, very deep thinker. Now he with the King of France as it then was, and he was going around mouthing off to everyone about how the King of France was spending loads of money and not behaving rightly and so on. So the king had him in, and he sat him across the table. Now they'd been half afraid of them because they were very close to the people, and taking a few drinks, and they were arguing the toss. And at one stage the King of France says to him, "Anyway, monk," he says, "tell me, the difference between an Irishman and an idiot. And Scotus is reputed to have said, "It's no more than the width of a table, Your Majesty." Now, what was the spirituality? Now, the Roman Catholic Church was then, and still, although they're slow learners, they're getting there, but they decried the world and the flesh and the devil. You know, all the presses, hell, right? The Celtic Church was totally different in that they saw the earth as the creation of God, a beautiful thing. People were the creators of God, the creation of God. There was good in everything. I'll show you some of the sayings later. A totally different outlook on life. Where they were weak is they were hopelessly organised. Whatever you have in yourself, you know this, and they would have arguments between one monastery and another. But the key things, they believed in the Creator, they believed in the Trinity, they believed in the Saviour. Now, they believed in the oneness of life. All life is marvellous. Animals, fish, humans, all life is the creation of the Creator. The blessings of life. Now, I have a thing, for example, I'm at an age, and like most families, you have your ups and downs and so on. I had 2 marriages gone down the tubes. One chap in his 40s with 2 kids, and his wife decides at 45 years of age that she's a lesbian. Well, that's grand, you know, no problem with the lesbian bit. Pity she didn't discover it a lot sooner. That is chaos that has led to. So, like everything else, you have your ups and downs, but I would have the Celtic outlook, the blessings of life, no matter what happens. And my wife laughs at me because I get up every morning and written on the wall, I have a saying by Jonathan Swift. "This day, whate'er the fates decree, shall still be kept with joy by me. This day, then, let us not be told that you are sick and I grown old, nor think of our approaching ills or talk of spectacles and pills. Tomorrow will be time enough to hear such mortifying stuff." Now, imminence. They believed that the other world was here among us. Not up there, not down there. I mean, since man first appeared on this earth, it's estimated that 135 billion people have lived and died on this earth. Now, if there's a physical heaven somewhere, billion people, personally I don't believe it. I believe it's a spiritual thing. I believe the body just goes back to the earth, but the spirit lives on. The famous philosopher and theologian Tallaght de Chardin said, "We are not physical creatures with a spiritual dimension. We are spiritual creatures with a physical dimension. Spiritual is the permanent, the physical is the transient." That appeals to me. And the Celts believed in the other world. It was an invisible world, but it was there. And there were places like tops of mountains, wells, where they believed that they were thin places. In other words, you're very close to the other world. So it's a whole different way of thinking. Asceticism, they were big into asceticism, austerity, so eremitism, which is hermits, creative work, and a sense of mission. Get out there, do it. Get out there and do it. Here's some of the kind of reflections. This is Columban's. I like this one. All of life, all of nature, pulsates with the life force of the creation, and there is nowhere where the Creator is not. Isn't that smart? And you compare that with some of those. Here's another one there. Deep peace of the running wave to you, deep peace of the flowing air to you, deep peace of the quiet earth to you, the peace of the shining stars to you, the peace of the sun of peace to you. Now, there's been a revival in Celtic spirituality because for centuries it didn't suit the established church to go into all that because it wasn't the Roman way, the Roman Catholic way. It was Catholic. The Celtic church was Catholic. It wasn't Roman Catholic. And people now who are getting a bit bewildered with what's happening in all this, but are still spiritual, more and more are turning back to Celtic spirituality. And when you go into the shops, you'll see it there. I've left some books there if you want to look at it afterwards. But it's a totally different, it's Catholic now, but it's a totally different way of looking at things. I'll show you an example here now. There's a modern Pope. Modern Pope, pure Celtic. Pure Celtic. Now, we'll get to Glendalough eventually. So that church lasted 600 years. They were aware of Rome, but they kept their distance. They had their own way of doing things. They had a different date, for example, for Easter, because the Roman Catholic Church went and changed the calendar. And the lads said, oh no, we're not having that, we stay with that. So the weakness of the strength of it was the simplicity, the spirituality, the human touch, the belief in the immanence of the other world very close to them. The weakness was it had no central control. Now the Roman Catholic Church had that in spades, too much of it. So it's a question of two extremes. But a movement started within the Celtic Church to come into line with Rome. And various synods were held. In the Synod of Leighlin, they adopted the Roman method of calculating Easter. Now a problem arose in Whitby, where northern England was the Celtic Church, and the Roman Catholic Church had come back into England in the late 600s, and Canterbury, St. Augustine, and that was Roman Catholic. And then to really mess it up, the King of Northumbria, who was Celtic Christianity, decided to marry a princess from Kent who was Roman Catholic. So a big synod was held to decide what should be done, and it was decided they should follow the Roman Catholic method, and that ended the Celtic Church in Britain. The two big settlements, there were lots of them, but the two big ones were Lindisfarne and Iona. Lindisfarne, the monks went to Inishbofin, and Iona, the monks went to Kells. And it's believed that most of the Book of Kells was actually written in Iona, and they brought it back together. So things rested so, but that was England, and that was sorted out. But then we go through a few hundred years, and then a movement starts then in 1101 in Ireland to start to bring it into line. And they had a number of synods here. And I just very quickly go down, but we want to get to Glendalough. The Synod of Inishpatrick, which is an island off Skerries, had a big place in the Celtic Church, because when Patrick came up the Irish Sea, he was heading for Saul up in Down, and they stopped over in Inishpatrick. So that's the first place where they stopped, set up a church. So it had big significance. And there they decided to seek Pallia from the Pope, and I'll explain to you what Pallia are later. The big man pushing all the chains was Malachy, and Malachy was the abbot of Armagh. And Malachy had made a number of trips to Rome, and he used to travel across France through Clairvaux, and he met St. Bernard, who had founded the Cistercians. And it was through Bernard, the first Roman Catholic priests that were brought into Ireland, where Malachy brought in the Cistercians from Clairvaux to Mellifont. And that was the first Roman Catholic priest. So they got this agreement of going to seek the Pallia. I'll explain later there. But on the way to Rome, Malachy died in Clairvaux in the arms of St. Bernard. And if you ever visit Clairvaux, in front of the high altar there are two big tombs in the ground. One of them is the great St. Bernard, founder of the Cistercians, and the other is Malachy, the abbot of Armagh. So now the whole thing was up in a heap. And the man who picked up the gauntlet and kept going, and we'll come to it later because it links into Glendalough, is Lawrence O'Toole. Lawrence O'Toole. Now, the Synod of Kells was very important because they finally agreed. They would establish dioceses, they would establish parishes, they would establish 4 archdioceses, 36 dioceses, and they're the same that are there today. They should be rationalised down to about 10 or 12. It's bloody nonsense, like, that some of them only have 15, 20 parishes, like, pure administrative terms. But anyway, that's not. They had an argument over the primacy, whether it would be Dublin or whether it would be Armagh in recognition. Dublin was building up, you see, as a kind of a big place, but Armagh was Patrick and Malachy. And it was the first Irish solution to an Irish problem. The papal legate was Cardinal Paparo, and he said, well, listen lads, how about this? What if the Archbishop of Dublin was the Primate of Ireland, and the Archbishop of Armagh was the Primate of Ireland? And they said, yeah, we're fine. That's pure, absolute bloody nonsense. And the last person to make use of that, to the great annoyance of his colleagues, was a man called John Charles McQuaid. Because when the hierarchy would meet, and they would settle on something and say, well, that's it, lads, such and such, the Archbishop of Armagh, as the Primate, would send out a note, this is it, Archbishop of Armagh, Primate of all that. And then John Charles would write one at his bit and sign it, John Charles McQuaid, Primate of Ireland. Now, no Archbishop of Dublin has used that title since John Charles McQuaid. It's a bloody nonsense. But it solved a big problem. Then the other big one, and Paparo said, back to Rome, and of course you have to solve the saints. And Rome said, what saints? And he said, they have hundreds of them. What do you mean? Every bloody monk at every corner. And Rome, which can be very nitpicking, took a good line on this one. The word came back, just ignore it, just ignore it. With the result, and here's one for you now, there are only 4 Irish people canonised saints by Rome. 4. And you needn't start with Patrick or Bridget, get rid of all them, they're all make it. Who cares? But there are only 4, anyone like to have a go?
Plunkett.
Lawrence O'Toole.
Oliver Plunkett.
Oliver Plunkett.
Charles.
Who?
Charles.
Father Charles, he wasn't Irish. The Mount Argus man,
Yeah.
he wasn't Irish.
He's Belgian, wasn't he?
No. He lived in Ireland, and he lived in Mount Argus, but he wasn't Irish.
According to Pat Liddy, he's an Irish saint.
Ah?
According to Pat Liddy, he was an Irish saint.
Well, according to Frank Tracy, he's not. Malachy, Lawrence O'Toole, Fergal. Remember the man Würzburg? Yeah. And Oliver Plunkett in their own lifetime. They're the only Irish-born people. And in the case of Fergal, he spent most of his life in Salzburg, but he was Irish. And that's it. It doesn't matter. Now, by that stage, the English, the Anglo-Normans had come into Ireland, and Henry II was getting very worried about this new whole church and the power and so on. So he was very lucky that the Pope at the time was the only English Pope ever, Adrian. And he got a letter from Adrian telling these lads that Henry was the boss. And Henry came over, Synod of Cashel, and that was the end of the Celtic Church. And what we see when we go around to all these old places, and Cashel and Glendalough and Tominaroys, are the remnants of that Celtic Church, which lasted for 600 years. Now, we didn't get taught that at school because it didn't fit the kind of, it was brushed over the Island of Saints in Scotland. Now, so we'll use, there's the dioceses that were created. They cut across counties because counties didn't exist when the dioceses were created. Now, so there's the key, the reform of the Celtic Church, now the Billiter, that's the letter that Henry got, the Anglo-Norman invasion and the English lordship of Ireland, and so we know what happened from there on. Now, Glendalough, the story of Glendalough is contained in 3 books, codexes, 80 words per book, Salamancacensis, that's where it was found. Because in the penal times, all these books were smuggled out of the country. Because they're getting burned and destroyed and everything. And the Codex Kilkenniensis was found, and the Annals of the Four Masters. The oldest structure in Glendalough was this little care. Remember I showed you earlier the care, that's where they lived, there was 40,000 of them. And there's one in, and this is a drawing that I did, a recreation of what it would look like. There. There's Cavan. Everyone knows Cavan. He has blackboard. Every saint is a symbol. Anthony has a lily. Peter has keys. And in Italy, where they make all these statues, they have all these statues along there, and they're all white. They're just not painted on. And you come in and you say, what's your Anthony? Oh yeah, right. The lily. What's it there? Anthony is brown. Anthony. Kevin? Right. Blackboard. Kevin. So when you see statues of saints, I'm not up on them all, but when you see statues of saints, the key thing is the symbol. And that will tell you who it is. Okay? So Kevin is the blackboard, and I'll tell you why it's the blackboard later, not this minute. So Kevin was from a kind of reasonably well-off family in Wicklow, and he was trained in Kilnamanagh, church monks, round town. And then himself and a few companions hit off to set up a hermitage. And in one of the books it tells you that they found a place in Glendalough at the foot of a landslide. Do you see the landslide there? See that? What a landslide. Do you see the little church?
Yes.
And you see the walls area there? And when that was excavated, they found the remains of a couple of beehive huts. And that's where he set up his hermitage, there in Glendalough. There's the little church. Now they didn't have this wind in it, modified over the years, but the basic remnants of the church are there. Now you used to be able to go over by boat.
Not anymore.
You can't do that anymore. The main reason you can't do that anymore is women. Now I'll come to that later. I don't want the women at this stage to get agitated. Hold your breath, and I guarantee you by the time I get to it, you'll agree with me. Now, there's St. Kevin's bed. Not the big cave, see the little one? See it up there? Now, they were into mortification, I told you that, they would pray and so on. Now, Glendalough was a big mining area down through the centuries, and it's reckoned, that's certainly man-made. It's about 9 feet long and about 2'6" square. And what they reckoned was, it was a pilot drilling to see was there ore in there. And when there wasn't, they abandoned it. So, the little hermitage is just there. So you used to walk across here, go in there and sleep in there. Now, nice little spot in there, happy enough. Lawrence O'Toole used to use it 200 years later. When he moved from the hermitage, they set a cell for him up on the hill, and there's the remains of his cell there. And you can walk to that. Most of it has disappeared. At the cell, there's the blackboard. There's a little carving by Imogen Stewart, Kevin and the blackboard, and there's a little bit of poetry from Seamus Heaney. One upturned palm is out the window, stiff as a crossbeam, and a blackboard lands and lays in it and settles down to rest. The story is, he stuck his hand out one morning to see what the day was like. And a blackboard landed in the hand and laid in there. And he didn't want to disturb the blackboard. So he built up a load of stone under the arm, and he held it out until the egg was hatched. Whatever you have in yourself. So that's the story, and that's how the symbol of Cavan is the blackboard. The nearest church to Kevin's hermitage is Reeford. Ree is king and Firth is burial place. The hermitage and Kevin's cell were so sacred that the local chieftains took to burying themselves. And that was the equivalent of a chapel royal. And you know by the quality of the graves in there, see all these slabs, you had to be a knob to get one of them. You see the Celtic inscriptions on that cross there. Now that's on a piece of schist. Now schist is a nightmare. It's like carving into slate, And see that slab? That would have been heavily carved at one stage. See it there? So these are all big people there. There's a line of crosses across the valley at that point, and these mark the boundary of the original heritage. This is at the upper lake. So you're at the oldest part of it, up there. The main monastery, which was built after his death, one of the books says it was built on the land between where the two rivers meet, the Glendalough and the Glendalough. And it's still there, on top of the hill there. An extract. Celtic Christianity had now taken over from the Celtic culture. And here's the Martyrology of Angus, 797. The great settlement of Tallaght has died with the loss of its princes. Great Armagh lives on with its choirs of scholars. The fortress of Cruachan has vanished at Allil, victory's child. A fair dignity greater than kingdoms is the city of Clonmacnoise. The proud settlement has died away with its the Martyrology of Angus. Now, the next church we look at, this is the church, my favourite place in Glendalough, and 99% of people who go to Glendalough don't even know it's there, because you go across a farmer's land to get to it. For years he would be trying to stop people, and any time a finger sign went up, it disappeared. Then he was taken to court, and it's now established as a right of way. So, from the road. St. Mary's, incidentally, in the Celtic Church, you don't have the term Our Lady. Our Lady is a continental term. Something like Princess or whatever. It's a title esteem, Our Lady. Lady this, lady, Our Lady, and so on. So it's a continental term, and a term of reverence, but it didn't exist in the Celtic Church. In the Celtic Church, the Mother of Jesus, Niamh Willa Waterday, St. Mary was her mother. It's always St. Mary. And if you go into a Celtic settlement and someone has put up a sign Our Lady's Church, it's wrong. It's St. Mary's. Not that it matters, it's the hotel there. And that is the chapter house of the Augustinian Abbey, of the Augustinians who ran the cathedral. And we know, because we were built to a universal design, that the rest of it's out there. Up to 3 weeks ago, I used to say, and this is Lawrence O'Toole's heart, which unfortunately is missing. No, that's not good sense. Up to 3 weeks ago. But it's never back again. It's back again. And Lawrence was appalled at the atrocities committed by the Anglo-Normans when they come in, and they come into Dublin and so on. And he was by then Archbishop of Dublin and papal legate, so he's quite a powerful man. He went off to tackle Henry II to say, look, this had to stop. And Henry heard he was coming and took off to Normandy. And Lawrence followed him in the depth of winter, got a chill, and he died in the Augustinian Abbey of EU. Where he's venerated much more than he is in Dublin. There's a huge basilica to Lawrence and all that. His body is venerated there. The monks that were with him brought his heart back to Dublin. And that's his heart. And you know the story, a few travellers robbed it, and they were venerating it. And then 2 of them got heart attacks, and they decided that they were cursed. And they rang the guards and told them they could have it back. So there you are, only in Ireland is developed. There's Lawrence, and there's Kevin, the beginning and the end. And I'll just finish off with some paintings of Glendalough, which are in various places. There's the start of the hotel. Look at there, the hotel. Now, Up until the 70s, women used to go out in the groves to get into St. Kevin's bed because it was said that you'd be guaranteed fertility if you got into St. Kevin's bed. Now, to get into St. Kevin's bed, you had to be manhandled up and down. And women, virtuous women, who in everyday life wouldn't allow a man within 50 yards of them, were allowing these local men to crash them up and down. Eventually the OPWs would offer price. But they were queuing up all day, every day. Look at the smile on her face. There's a little painting I have myself with Glendalough, and there's another one I have myself. So thank you very much.
Questions, folks? It was absolutely magnificent.
We'll go down to Glendalough now and savour it. Find St. Mary's.
First of all, Frank, I look forward to 2 weeks' time when I can watch that again. But I have one question, the Cow Cross,
Yes.
I thought that was associated with St. Francis of Assisi, is it? So what's the significance of it?
Like a Franciscan cross.
I see.
And there's only 4 of them now. There's one of them in Dalkey there, just beside the castle there. There's one, a big one on Tory Island. And there's only 2 or 3, but it's associated with Franciscan. It's on their emblem. You know where the 2 cross, in the middle is the Tallaght.
With all their roof stone, with the roof and stone and all.
Well, yes, for the more important churches, the less important are thatch.
When the timber come in.
Well, the thatch will be held up by timber.
And
So we have the thatch and houses up into our
how many people were in Glendalough?
Well, they reckon at its peak that there was over 1,000 monks. And then all the ancillary services. It was a big place.
And there was a trail from Kilnamanagh to Glendalough at one stage.
Well, there probably was. It's St. Kevin's Way now, from Downard across the mountains. They came up West Wicklow to Downard and then across. And it was still at St. Kevin's Way.
Well, I was just going to say, Frank, thanks very much. I really enjoyed the talk. But the latest thinking in archaeology now, because of archaeological evidence, is that we are the Celts and it went that way. It didn't come from Europe to us.
Big stretch of the imagination.
That's the latest.
Well, I've learned long ago that where the women in your life is concerned, the best line of defence is surrender. Poor Pope Francis, who am I to judge? But I don't believe it. And I'm an archaeologist too.
Yeah, it's the latest thinking.
Oh, I should know.
I know.
Well, I'd love to see the proof.
Well, it's, yeah, okay.
Can I ask you something? When did that stop, the women going across in the boat and the men?
In the early 70s. When the OPW took over, there was a family there, Bulgers, and they had the boating rights. And the OPW bought out the boating rights. That was a sensible thing to do.
Hugely involved in the Celtic Church is something I hadn't really focused on, so we're really grateful for
Didn't
that.
suit the agenda.
I can see that, yeah, absolutely. But it's a very important part of our heritage. I wanted to ask you, Mary and myself went down about a fortnight ago to Glendalough.
Yes.
And I have to say, I found it enormously disappointing in the sense, I had a sense of neglect of the whole place and of lack of being cared for, or even lack of information as to, you know what I mean? I've learned more from what you said today, but when you're there, it's unbelievably uninformative. And the second point, Frank, and is a kind of puzzle. The OPW, the visitor centre, seemed to be, I don't know, it was something almost in a world of its own, and not terribly welcoming, and seemed to be disconnected really from the Glendalough itself. And we had a strange, both of us had a strange feeling about the whole place. And we came back, I would say, frustrated in the sense we haven't got a fraction of what's there for some reason.
Well, I can tell you exactly what you see, Glendalough is geared primarily to tourists, American tourists and so on, and the impression is marvellous. And the more kind of antiquated it is now, the better antiquity and so on. Now, if you want to seriously go into Glendalough, don't go down there on a weekend.
No.
That's number one.
Right.
Go down there on a weekday and do your homework.
When we did go in anticipation of this, we went down.
But you do your homework, and there's plenty of books. So do your homework, and you go down there knowing what you're looking for. I mean, you could have found St. Mary's now, but on the way you went, you had no idea what it is. No idea. Well, the same in Reeford, you know. And so you have to do the homework, and you have to go around. Now, I know you do the summer trips and all the rest. If there were a group of people who wanted to do a day trip to Glendalough, I have brought her. There's no money involved. But I only bring interested people. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you bring people, and I had a big distraction. I had a crowd from DIT that I was bringing around the old city of Dublin once, and they were foreign students, you see, and I was asked what I do. I said, yeah. So I told them, you know, to be quiet, to listen. If they didn't want to listen, then just stand at the side and so on. But I was distracted all the way by a pair who were canoodling all the time. But the bit that really distracted me, this is kind of first world stuff. There were two girls. So back to Glendalough, do the homework.
Were they male or female?
Female. But then look, wherever you have it. But it's not a spectator sport. You know? If there are people who are really interested, what I normally do is I meet down there at 11, we have a coffee, and in the morning, luckily it's a figure of 8. In the morning we do the Upper Lake and the old Hermitage and so on. Then we have a bowl of soup, and then we do the main thing. I'm not looking for it, but if there's people genuinely interested, and I understand exactly where you're at, because you went cold to it, do you understand? Even from the little bit I've said, you know, I bet you we went back again.
And we were there years and years ago.
Oh, yeah. It's like I said,
tourists are interested because of being a former university. They see it like that.
Oh, yeah.
Frank, can you talk to me a little about Glendalough and its power as a medieval university?
Yeah, well, all these major monastic settlements were seats of learning. University is too strong a word. The Celts didn't have universities. They were seats of learning, and they were into studying the New Testament, the Old Testament. They were into the manuscripts and all that. An interesting thing about the manuscript, if you look even at the Book of Kells, and there's writing, now at the start of paragraphs are these fancy letters, and then you might find in the middle of a paragraph a fancy letter, and you say, why did you do that? That was a typo. You made a mistake. And he said, oh shit. And then he buried it in a big letter. Because you couldn't erase it. And I have a little card at home. Can you imagine? There was only candles, like, you know, blind. I had a little card at home of a monk, and he just said, and the abbot is above him like this. And he's looking up and he says, deadline, he says. Nobody said that to me about a deadline. This was their life's work, you know. And they studied and they discussed and they debated, but they didn't see them as universities, you know. And they brought all that learning to Europe. They reconverted Europe. You know, they reconverted Europe. Okay, you're spun out.
So,